Hey guys, Monochrome here. Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, welcome. Genuinely good to have you. Got a book review for you today. Yes, you will find this video under my often neglected but not forgotten book review playlist. And it's a very interesting one, especially for you preppers out there. The Survival Chemist. This book has a bunch of recipes in it that is related to prepping, or, as it was known back then, survivalism. I do want to mention the book was first published back in 1990 by Desert Publications. And those of you from back in the day, oh yeah, you know what Desert Publications, Delta Press, and Paladin Press. Oh yeah, you know. This was back during the golden age of very controversial books / manuals, right before the internet made its presence known throughout the world. Yep, right at the start of that, from 1990 to 2000. You had that period of time mostly dominated by Paladin Press. This is from Desert Publications, which I believe back then, maybe still today, is a branch of Delta Press. We're talking the most controversial books and how-to manuals that you could possibly name. And this one, yep, right at the very start of that period, 1990, that particular timeline. And quite frankly, it's not as extreme as you might think. As you can see, this book is very thin and it's not big at all. The camera angle makes it look absolutely full-sized. It's not. Depending on how deep your cargo pants pockets are, you could probably slip this into one of its pockets. And as you can see, very thin. Total number of pages, 59. Now, guys, there's an old saying, and it definitely applies to this book. Basically, a little bit of knowledge is a dangerous thing. Well, sometimes a little bit of knowledge is an extremely dangerous thing. Don't think of this as a how-to book. Think of this as a primer on how to make certain things, how to do certain things. Also, I do have to say, I'm doing this book review under the fair use doctrine. It's a review. I own this book personally. I'm reviewing it. I will be showing the table of contents because that is extremely interesting. But just to give you guys a quick taste, recipes include beer making, yes, from scratch. And they do include explosives. I do need to emphasize that both the publisher, the author, and this reviewer, the information in this book is for entertainment purposes only. Author, publisher, and this reviewer, yeah, all of us, same thing. Information purposes only. If you try to recreate something in this book and you get injured or you injure someone else, I am not responsible. This is just a book review, and in a review, you have to mention what the contents of a book are. It's just that simple. If you try any of the recipes here, any of the techniques, and you get hurt or killed, or you hurt or kill someone else, I am not responsible. Again, Information and entertainment purposes only. That's what this book is about. And also, I need to emphasize this to an extreme degree. This is not a how-to manual, although it might seem like that to some individuals reading through it. No, this is a primer. What do I mean by that? Well, if you buy this book and you read the extremely short chapter, and all of the chapters are extremely short. We're talking on average maybe 3 pages, and that's with line drawings. But yeah, for example, if you read the chapter on beer making and decide, great, I know how to make beer now. No, you don't. No, you don't. That's like reading a chapter on farming in a more conventional book and thinking that makes you a farmer. No, no, no. I will say this. If you read the chapter on beer making and you're genuinely interested in perhaps brewing up a batch of beer, go out and get more reference material, more books, more how-to manuals, thick ones that go in depth into detail on how to do that. And not just that chapter, all the others. That's what I mean by primer. This gives you a taste of what is capable of being made or created. This is not a step-by-step, completely thorough, here's every single detail how-to manual. It can't be. Look at how thin it is. Even if this book was just about beer making and nothing else, it would still be too thin. So yeah, that's what I mean by primer. It lets you know what's possible, and if you find a chapter of great interest, go out, buy more books, buy more reference materials, thick ones that go into detail, and know exactly what you're doing. If you decide to try anything mentioned in this book or those books, keep in mind that's going to be a personal choice on your part, nothing to do with me. One interesting chapter is the one that covers fission products in radiation protection. Now, I think that is a very important chapter, and that chapter in particular should lead you to get more reference materials and learn more about radiation, especially if you're a prepper or maybe you don't think the word survivalist is a dirty word. I'll be honest, I do own a Geiger counter. They're perfectly legal to own. I do have one, and I've only just started doing more research into fission and radiation. The book is printed in the US of A. And that makes sense because honestly, books like this one are banned in a number of countries. And you might be surprised which ones. I'm not talking about countries that are basically dictatorships by committee or countries where individuals pretend to be presidents, but once elected, they just never leave office. No. I'm not talking about those countries. When I finished up high school, I gave serious consideration to possibly moving to the UK, specifically England. I gave serious consideration to that. That lasted a short while because Like a lot of people, you think, okay, I'll move to the UK. There aren't going to be a lot of differences compared to America. It's basically the very same language. Certain words mean different things than other words. For example, if you walked into a men's clothing store as a man and you asked for a pair of pants and suspenders, they're going to look at you funny in the UK because pants and suspenders mean something completely different than what they mean here in America. And that's why they're going to look at you very funny and say, "Sir, I think you're in the wrong store if you're looking for those." And here's another example, the word rubber. I walked into a pharmacy and I bought a rubber. Well, in one country, it means condom. In another country, it means an eraser. So, yeah, there's a bit of difference in the language. I knew that, but I figured, okay, communication shouldn't be too difficult. I'll let people correct me for the first couple of years I'm there. And I took a very serious look at moving across the pond until I found out that if I did so, my personal private library of controversial books, such as this one, would be confiscated and burned. No, I'm not kidding. Now, this was back in the mid 1990s. Maybe things have changed. I doubt it. So, yeah, I never moved to England because I found out that not only would I have to give up my vast collection of controversial books that are part of my private library and which are protected under the Constitution here in America, but those books would actually be burned. Yeah, no, no, no. That was reason enough. So, yeah, printed in the US of A. Now, let's take a look at the table of contents. You might be surprised just how large it is. Let's see here. Yep. Table of contents. What do we have? Shelter, explosives, food and water, radiation protection. Yes, radiation protection. Alcohol, basically how to make beer, moonshine, and something called dandelion wine. Now, I would advise a great deal of caution, even if you do your research and decide, hey, I'm going to make dandelion wine. You know, here in America, we use a ton of massive industrial strength pesticides. So, yeah, I wouldn't collect dandelions and eat them or collect them and try to make wine from them unless we're talking a private plot of land that you know hasn't been absolutely covered in industrial strength pesticides. So that right there, that's one example. You have to have experience or a ton of knowledge. Drugs, nicotine, codeine, again, very controversial. There are some survival notes, appendices, and the thing is, guys, this book emphasizes making certain things so you could use them as trade or barter items. Imagine, if you will, economic collapse, some sort of disaster. Well, those who have prepared What are you going to do long term? And even if you've prepared, even if it's relatively short term, like maybe an economic disaster that only lasts a couple of years, still, what you have is not going to be everything that you need unless you're a freaking billionaire with a giant underground shelter and you've stored literally everything on the face of the planet that you could need to wait out an economic collapse. No, that's realistically those who have survived, preppers, they're going to barter and trade with each other. Well, you can't barter or trade once your stockpile of anything is down to zero. So something like this, maybe you're not a beer drinker. Maybe you're someone who only very rarely, occasionally drinks, and you're a social drinker, like I am. Well, unfortunately, there are going to be people out there who may have survived, but, ooh, they want a drink. They need a drink. Or maybe they want to celebrate a milestone. Hey, we've survived for a year. Our family is intact. Let's get some drinks. Who has some? And if you happen to be someone known for being able to make your own beer, when you make a batch of beer, you've got a trade item. Same thing with drugs. Same thing with a lot of other items mentioned in this book. And that is the perspective that the author takes. It's like, here's some things you can make that, okay, you might be able to use them, but the rest of the stuff, why not trade and barter for things you need that you don't have? Low on ammunition for your oddball caliber rifle that you probably shouldn't have bought? Okay, well, if you know how to make beer or wine, and you know that there's another prepper out there in your community who really enjoys alcohol and he's stockpiled tons of ammunition and tons of different calibers, well, there you go. I mean, yes, there is the moral aspect of should you give or trade away alcohol to someone who's a borderline alcoholic in a survival situation or a post-economic collapse situation. There is that moral aspect. Some people say, hey, I have to do whatever I can to survive. And yes, I have morals, but I can't expect my children to eat my morals. There you go. Maybe you know how to make wine, but you're low on rice. Why not trade that alcohol for food? That's another aspect. So your children or your spouse could eat. Again, this is a primer. It's not an in-depth how-to manual. So this is something I do recommend if you're interested in the topics being covered. This is something that will give you the basic information, some step-by-step information, but personally, I don't recommend using this as a how-to manual. It's just way too thin, covers way too many subjects. Get the book, read the book. If you find something truly interesting, then get out and get more reference material. And if you try to attempt anything mentioned in this book, I'm not responsible. Again, information, entertainment purposes only. That's why I'm presenting this review. I do recommend the book. It's very short. It's basically 59 pages, including the table of contents. And yeah, it covers some very interesting aspects. Mainly, I use this book because as an amateur writer, I need to have my characters be able to sound like they know what the hell they're talking about. I mean, I can't write a story about a guy who knows how to make prison wine, and meanwhile, I have no clue how that's done. But, if you're an author or if you're a writer, even an amateur writer like I am, it's important to have a good reference library. So you create characters who aren't BSing their way through a scene or a situation. Got to create characters who know what the heck they're talking about. That's the main reason I bought this book. However, yeah, a lot of the things covered in this book could genuinely come in handy during a sustained economic collapse, especially as trade or barter items. Okay, guys, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed this very interesting, controversial book review. I'll see you guys soon. Please continue to stay safe out there. Yeah, unfortunately, it's still dangerous.